Great, let's get started. So thanks for joining. My name is Julia. I'm a product manager at protocols.io. I also have my colleague Emma here in the background who will be monitoring questions. So welcome to Introduction to protocols.io. I'll be introducing the platform, showing you how to get started, and we'll go from there. There will also be the opportunity to give feedback on this webinar at the end, so keep that in mind throughout if there's anything you'd like to give feedback on. So as I said before, we will record this webinar and that's being recorded now. And registrants will receive a link to the recording as well as to the slideshow. Closed captioning should be enabled if you would like to use them. And I'll speak for about 40 minutes, and then there'll be the opportunity for Q&A at the end, but feel free to put your questions into the Q&A box or the chat box throughout the webinar. You can also check out other webinars or request a personal demo at the following links. So these are the topics that I'll be covering today. So I'll introduce protocols.io. I'll talk about why method sharing matters. So protocols.io is a protocol and method sharing repository. I'll introduce the concept of modular publishing, and then the majority of the webinar will be introducing the different features of protocols.io, and I'll jump out of the slides into the platform to give a demo, and then Q&A. So protocols.io, as I said before, is a protocol and method sharing platform. It was founded in 2012 and was a startup for nearly 10 years before it was acquired by Springer Nature in 2023. So it's used by top universities, hospitals, and government organizations. You can see some of our customers who subscribe to premium protocols.io below. We have over 200,000 registered users on the platform, as well as public and private protocols. And really the mission of protocols.io is to make it easy to share method details before, during, and after publication. So there are two sides to the platform. On the one hand, we are an open access repository. So this is where you can discover and publish detailed scientific protocols. It's completely free to read and free to publish. And there are over, I think it's over 24,000 public published protocols that are on the platform right now. The other side of the platform is that it can be used as a private collaboration tool to create, share, and optimize protocols within your team or organization before publication, or if you don't choose to publish at all. And there's over 90,000 private protocols. So a lot of people are storing and developing their protocols and then before they're publishing. So as I'll show on the next slide, the open access public side of protocols.io will always be free, but to take full advantage of the private collaboration side of protocols.io, some organizations have a premium license. And so if you go to protocols.io/plan/academia, you can see the differences between the different options. And as I said before, with this open research option shown on the left here, you can have up to 2 private protocols, but unlimited public protocols that you receive a DOI for, and this will always be free for publishing and making your research open. And then these are the other premium options that are available. So you may already be part of an organization that has premium access, and you can check that if you go to protocols.io/for institutions. you'll need to scroll down the page and you'll see this drop down, and you can see what organizations already have premium to check if your organization is in that list. So the reason that protocols.io came about is that unfortunately it can be quite difficult to find detailed replicable methods in the published literature. So this can be due to a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's inconsistent practices in labs or researchers' busy schedules. And what ultimately happens is that the methods are lost. So these are some examples that we've pulled together over the years from Twitter/X of researchers complaining about their inability to find methods. So my favorite of these examples is the middle one, where there's a long citation chain, devices were fabricated as previously described again and again and again. And then when you come back to the original paper, it says devices were fabricated with conventional methods, which is not very helpful. And so even in published research, finding those detailed experimental and methods is difficult. And this can have an impact on the reproducibility of research. So this is a project that was taken nearly 10 years ago now, and it's the Cancer Reproducibility Project. So the goal of that project was to take 50 published high-impact important papers in cancer biology and try and replicate them. So unfortunately, those papers were not reproducible. And in this write-up from The Atlantic, they talk about that the hardest part of that reproducibility was finding out what the original labs did. And that was because the recipes or, methods and protocols were incomplete, missing important steps, details, and ingredients, or weren't described at all. And with protocols.io, we want to make sure that scientists can be describing those recipes in full detail and that they're published and permanent. And then again, this is another write-up by the Center for Open Science that says, 0% of those protocols were completely described. So we are unfortunately still seeing this today. So this is a article that was published a few weeks ago now on a recent reproducibility study. And I think this is a really nice quote from one of the researchers who was involved in that study. And so he says that low reproducibility highlights structural weaknesses in the way that we produce, document, and communicate science, and that these problems demand action, such as open sharing of data and protocols. And that's what protocols.io aims to do. So this leads me into the concept of modular publishing. If you aren't familiar with that concept, it's where we step back from the research publication being the sole output associated with research and break down research into modules or outputs that can be published independently, be it code, methods, or data. They're published in fit-for-purpose repositories, and then all of those preliminary outputs can then be linked into the central research publication, which is more of a narrative and story of the research. And we can see a nice example of that in practice in this Nature Communications paper. So we can see in the data availability statement that the expression constructs were deposited on AdGene, the protocols were deposited on protocols.io, and the molecular structure was deposited in the protein data bank. So each of the different outputs are published in different repositories that suit their purpose. And protocols.io is a repository for methods and protocols. And so one of the benefits of publishing additional research outputs in addition to a traditional research paper is that they have distinct author lists. So this is that same paper I showed on the previous slide, and we can see that the author, Kelsey Ramirez, she's fourth author in the paper, but the protocol that was linked within that paper, she is first author on the protocol. So that protocol is a metric that she can have ownership over and stewardship of. So she can list that protocol on her CV, and she can track the metrics for that individual protocol, which might differ from the paper, and overall clearly demonstrate her contribution to this piece of work. And so all the protocols on protocols.io have metrics that are associated with them. I'll show that in more detail later when I jump onto the platform, but what we can see here is that for the published protocols, we can see exactly how many people are viewing them. Does that change over time? Who's bookmarking them and who's reusing that research through forks and run records, which are some of the features of protocols.io that I'll talk about in more detail later. And so unlike static Word or PDF documents that or supplementary information that cannot be updated over time, the protocols published on protocols.io are dynamic and interactive. And so you can see there's a structured step-by-step format. You can add in notes or other information. People can comment on that protocol to ask questions or give suggestions. And you can add in other features like images and videos. If they are published, you receive a DOI. People can cite that individual protocol as well. And you can also submit them for peer review. So when protocols are published on protocols.io in the first instance, we don't provide a peer review service, but we have partnerships with several journals who will peer review your protocols on the platform. And I'll show that later as well. And so what we're seeing is that people are publishing their methods and protocols in that dynamic interactive format on protocols.io. And then they can simply link to those methods within the materials and methods section of their publication. So there's no need to rewrite those methods on both protocols.io and your publication. You can simply link to the protocols.io DOI in your paper. And we can see an example here. When it's on protocols.io, other people can create forks of your protocol. That means they're creating their own private editable copy that they can make changes to and then publish. If they do publish a fork of your protocol, credit will always be retained back to you. You could also publish new versions of that protocol on protocols.io. So the paper would remain static, but this protocol on protocols.io can be updated and evolve over time. And if someone does come back to this static paper and click on that DOI, they will be taken to the version of the protocol that was published at the time that the paper was published, but they'll be notified that there might be a newer, updated version of that protocol that is available on the platform, and they can click to be taken to that new version. There's a variety of publishing options to publish your protocols on protocols.io, and you can choose how you want to publish and how transparent you want to be throughout the research process. So some people choose to publish their protocols immediately, independently of research publications. Sometimes they can link them to their publications later, or sometimes not at all. In other cases, authors would like to wait to publish their protocols on protocols.io until the corresponding manuscript is also published. And in that case, you can reserve a DOI, put that DOI in your manuscript, and then once that manuscript is published, we will detect that that's in the public literature and publish your protocol as well. Alternatively, you can make preliminary draft versions of your protocol public. So this is without a DOI, but it allows people to, and collaborators in the community to see what you're working on and benefit from making that protocol public. And we also have the different peer review options as well. So when you publish your protocols on protocols.io, this can also really increase their discoverability. So this is a really nice example in practice of what that might look like. So in this paper, it's on three-spine sickleback parasite. So that's a fish parasite. But within that paper, they cite a basic RNA extraction protocol. And then on Twitter, there was someone who was looking to do RNA extraction of primary cortical neuron cultures. Now, someone who's studying primary cortical neurons might not necessarily be searching the literature to find a paper on fish parasites. But someone came along, pointed to this basic triazole protocol on protocols.io. And so he was, and this other researcher were able to find this RNA extraction protocol, and it wasn't hidden within the supplementary information of a protocol on, a fish parasite. So when it comes to using protocols.io, there are several different areas of protocols.io that you can work in. So first are workspaces, and these are private or public groups where you can manage your protocols collaboratively. So I can have a workspace with several members, and they can see protocols that are associated in that workspace. They can comment on those protocols and access different resources. And you can create workspaces for an organization, department, team, or project. It's really flexible, whatever you decide. And then each workspace has a file manager, and this is the centralized private system for storing protocol files, run records, or other file types as well. And then there is the protocol files themselves and the editor to edit those files. And so the protocol files, as I showed before, are in a structured step-by-step format that's specifically designed for experimental methods. And we have a built-in protocol editor so that you can add as many bells and whistles as you need to make that protocol clear and reproducible. So let's go to protocols.io. These are some of the things that I'll be covering in the platform. So I'll show you how you can search for public protocols. I'll show the features of a public protocol. So the versioning, the DOI, forking, commenting metrics. I'll show you workspaces and the difference between public and private workspaces, how you can invite people into your workspace, change the visibility settings of that workspace, how you can import protocols from Word or PDF documents into that standard stepwise protocols.io format, share them with other people, and eventually publish them. So I will stop sharing and then re-share my screen. Okay, so this is the landing page on protocols.io. And this search box here, you can use to search the entire published repository of protocols.io. So I'm going to go and search for genome profiling. And I can see some of the hits from that search. So these are the different protocols published on the platform. So I can search directly for protocols, or I can search for specific authors, specific workspaces I want to join, resources that might be included as part of those workspaces, or also the protocols.io help center if I need any help finding anything. I can also sort these protocols. Right now they're sorted by relevance, but I can of course sort by date, title, or also the works for me. And so I'll show that later, but each protocol has a works for me button that if someone tries it in their lab, they can come back and click that button. So sorting by this is a nice way to pick protocols that have already been reproduced in multiple labs. So for the purposes of today, I'm going to show you this protocol here. So we can already see it has a lot of works for me clicks. And a lot of people have commented on it as well. And these here are the two workspaces. These are both public workspaces that this protocol is a part of. Okay, so I already have that protocol open here, and I'll run through the different features of a public protocol. So first of all, we can see up the top here that it's version 3 of this protocol. So the original version was published back in 2018, but since then the authors have made small incremental improvements to that protocol, improvements that might not warrant an entire new journal publication, but still improve the protocol, and they can publish those as new versions on protocols.io. I can come back and I can compare the versions to see what's changed between them as well. This is the DOI that's associated with this protocol, and this DOI is linked within this paper here. So I can click on this, it would take me to the paper that this DOI is linked within, and so that's this paper here. So if I search for protocols.io, they can see that they've distributed materials and field user questions and answers on protocols.io, and they've linked in that DOI. This is the Works for Me button. I can come in and I can click it and I can see exactly who it works for to make sure it's not just everyone from the author's lab. And I can see that it has a lot of bookmarks as well. So people have bookmarked it within protocols.io. This is a really popular protocol on the platform. It has over 1,000 comments. Not all protocols are like that. These authors really encourage community engagement. And I can go down to the steps of this protocol. And I can see that people have commented on individual steps of the protocol and asked questions that have been answered. And then these are the metrics that I was talking about before, so that are available for every published protocol. So you can visualize the reuse of your work that's published on protocols.io. The next thing I'll show is a nice example of the forking functionality. And so a version would be used in the instance where you have a method and you want to make a tweak or improvement to that same method. But a fork would be used in the case that you are changing that method for a slightly different purpose. So it might be a different virus, like in this example, a different piece of equipment, things like that. And so originally there was an Ebola virus sequencing protocol that was published on protocols.io. And then this protocol was created, which is a fork of that protocol. So it was adapted for use in COVID-19 instead of in Ebola. And I can come in and I can compare those two protocols. So this is the original and this is the COVID-19 fork. And I can see that they're largely the same, but there's very small tweaks and additional notes that have been added where this protocol has been adapted specifically for COVID. And I can also come in and visualize the forks and how that protocol, the tree of how that protocol is used over time. So we have version 1, there was a fork, and then there's additional forks created from that fork, and I can open this and we could see all the different versions and changes. So this is the published side of protocols.io, but let's go into the workspaces and file manager. So this is my workspace. This is a private workspace that I'm in, and I have a couple of fake people added to that workspace. But workspaces can also be public facing. So this is an example of a publicly facing workspace. So the Human Cell Atlas Method Development Community. So I could come in, anyone who's a member of protocols.io can come and join that workspace. And so if they do join that workspace, in addition to being able to see the protocol, the published protocols in that workspace, the discussions on those public protocols, workspace members would be able to see the file manager associated with that workspace. And so these are my protocol files. I also have a run record file. And so a single protocol file can be in multiple workspaces as well. So this here is a protocol that I've shared that has been shared with this workspace from a different workspace. And it appears in both workspaces, and I can organize this file however I want within my workspace. It won't change the organizational structure where it's stored in the other workspace, but all the changes will be synced between them. I'm an admin of this workspace, so I can come in and I can invite other people to that workspace. So if I go to members, you can see these are the people within my workspace, and I can invite other people from my lab or any other collaborators that I might have. Maybe I want to change this workspace from being private to being publicly facing and searchable on protocols.io. I can also come in and do that as well. So I can change the visibility settings to public if I want. Maybe I'm a PI and I want to be able to publish protocols from my workspace, but I don't want the students that have just come into my lab and are reviewing these protocols to be able to publish. I can adjust that as well within the workspace settings. So I can choose what I as an admin or other co-admins are able to do, and what the regular members of that workspace are able to do. And so I could turn off publishing here. Let's go back to the file manager. And so I can invite people into that workspace if I want them to be able to see all the files. But if I want to share an individual protocol file with someone else, I can do that as well. So let's share this demo protocol. So I can share by email address. They will show up in this list here of people who have access. And I can also share that protocol with an entire workspace as well. And when I do share, I can toggle that as view or view, edit, and publishing permissions. So I'll show you what the stepwise protocols file look like. So this is an example from wet lab research. So you can see we've got the steps and color-coded sections. They've added in tables that can be downloaded, additional notes for tips and tricks, and these different components for different variables in the experiment that want to be highlighted, like in this case, temperature and time. I also will show an example for more computational based research. And so this is a computational workflow. And so you can link out to other protocols. You can highlight specific software commands and link out to the software packages that might be used. And so there's really a lot of flexibility for what you can put in a protocol. This is the editor, what it looks like when you're editing a protocol. And you can come in and I can put in these components. So things like amounts, reagents. I can specify different values that I want to be filled out during an experiment, add in notes, expected results. There's a lot of flexibility with the information that you can put into a protocol. And so you'll be working on that protocol in potentially your private workspace. And then once it comes time to publish that, it's very easy to, in this same step-by-step format, click a button and it's made public. So this is that same protocol, and I can go up here and I can publish, reserve a DOI, or get my protocol peer reviewed with one of our partners. If I do get my protocol peer reviewed, I will get a peer review badge so that when other people come across it on the platform, that they'll know that this protocol has been peer reviewed. So let's move back into the slides and I will finish up. One moment. Okay. So a colleague of mine, Gabriel Gask, who's head of outreach at protocols.io, he runs some of these webinars as well on US time. He does interviews with researchers who have published their protocols on protocols.io and gotten them peer reviewed as well. It's called Protocol Spotlight Interviews. And you can find those posted on our social media. And so what I'm doing at the moment is pulling out some comments that people have made during those interviews. So this example here is with a postdoc from Kennesaw State University. So as a result of publishing his protocol on protocols.io, he established himself as someone with expertise in a specific technique, and as a result of that was tapped as a reviewer. He also felt that as an early career researcher, the protocols looked really great on his CV. Publishing your protocols on protocols.io can also help facilitate collaborations with other researchers. So the protocols are findable outside of the connections to traditional research publications. About 60% of the traffic that comes to protocols.io is directly from Google. So people are finding these protocols. And in this example from Professor Luciano, He said that 80% of his recent collaborations were a direct result of sharing publicly on protocols.io. So there is a lot of visibility that comes from it. So I think most of the examples that I showed today were a little bit more tailored to wet lab research, but to be clear, protocols.io is, agnostic to type of research. So people across disciplines use protocols.io to share their methods. And these are some examples from different disciplines and how they used protocols.io to share their methods. There's also several organizations that encourage the use of protocols.io to share methods openly. So lots of journals and publishers in their author guidelines recommend the use of protocols.io. There's also funders that recommend protocols.io in their grant guidelines and policies. And that first funder listed there, ASAP, they actually mandate that if they're providing you with funding, you need to be sharing your protocols on protocols.io. And of course, there's several institutions that subscribe to premium site license to enable their researchers to fully use the private and public sides of protocols.io. So if you want to learn more after this webinar and need any help when you're exploring protocols.io, we have lots of resources that you can access. So first of all, you can visit our help center, protocols.io/help. And we have articles for how to carry out different tasks. We also have short 1 to 2 minute tutorials that you can watch. And if you have specific questions, you can submit your feedback to us and we will respond to your questions. In addition to this webinar, we run them very regularly, 3 times a month across different time zones. You can sign up at protocols.io/webinars. If you don't want to wait for an upcoming webinar, you can watch our past webinars as well. And as I said earlier, you can request a one-on-one personal demo. So that would, if you're in Europe, that would probably be with me or Emma. And then the last thing that I want to spruik today is this is not a recurring webinar, but a one-off interview with Ruth Tim, who works at the US Food and Drug Administration, and she'll be talking about how they use protocols.io to share surveillance protocols. So that's upcoming on the 29th of May. And you can register on the Springer Nature website, and I've put the link up there. So that's the end of the webinar. Please go ahead and put your questions in the chat or the Q&A, and I would be happy to answer them. If you also would prefer your question to be answered off the recording, I will pause or finish the recording partway through the Q&A, so we can do that as well. I would also ask that you provide some feedback on the webinar. This really helps us make sure that we're bringing you the right information that you need and will be most helpful. And so you can scan the QR code, or I think Emma will put the link to the webinar feedback in the chat as well. So it's a few multiple choice questions that you can answer. I'll open the floor for questions now. Thank you.